Welcome, my dear friends. It's fantastic to see you again. In case you're a new dear friend, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an enjoyer of big brain activities in general. And why I always make this motion with my hands, I blame Adult Swim. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. And the subject matter of this episode involves role-playing games about movies and talking to lots of interesting people, including many that are going to receive interviews on this channel in the not-too-distant future, because I'm going to give you a report from the field. For in June 2024, I went to my favorite role-playing game convention, the North Texas Role-Playing Game Convention, also known as NTRPG Con or North Texas Con. So what is this thing? As the name may suggest, it is a role-playing game convention in Dallas, Texas. It's been going on for years, and I've personally gone to the past 3 years because as life started coming back into the convention scene post-COVID, there were a lot of conventions that still had restrictions about masks and jabs, and I ain't playing any of that game. Turns out the state of Texas had forbidden that any business or association impose those kind of restrictions, giving me exactly what I wanted, and having heard about how awesome they were in the past, the decision was easy. I was going to Texas. So in this report, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about North Texas Con, where it's held, how I got there, where I stayed, how I survived. I'm going to tell you about winches because winches are important at North Texas Con. We love our winches. And I'm going to tell you about my gaming experience to let you know how it went for me, and so maybe inform you about an option you'd like to explore in the future because it is an awesome con. So North Texas Con, what's it about? Primarily dedicated to old school role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, Divinity Edition pre-4E, game systems from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and the newer systems that are callbacks to those. That's the bread and butter of North Texas Con. Now you do get new games in there, like those retro clones I was talking about, but also experimental new stuff is more than welcome. And the game schedule I had this year, we're going to run the gamut of all those things. So North Texas is held at the Westin Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, or Westin DFW. This is a big, pretty building with lots of amenities, comfortable rooms, and a rooftop pool, believe it or not, and a pretty nice gym. Now, immediately adjacent to the Westin are 3 other hotels, all of which are cheaper than the Westin, but they're not as nice as the Westin. While last year I stayed at the Westin, this year I went across the street to the Wingate because in doing so I could save hundreds of dollars while getting a comparable quality room, and they throw in a free breakfast, which was pretty good. I'm tracking at the Westin, any food you get from them, you're gonna have to pay for. Now that does come at a cost because you can't beat the convenience of being in the hotel with the convention. So if you forget something up in your room, you're just an elevator right away to getting what you need and getting right back down into the action. If you want to take a break in the day, you don't have to go out into the scalding Texas heat to go to another hotel, go up the elevator, and take all that extra time to do it. But effectively, I only had to cross the road once in the morning to get over to the Westin and once in the evening to get back. So I did make sure to give the Westin some of my money, and I made sure to tip whoever I needed to. So don't at me, but this is one of those cases where you have options when it comes to where to lay your head at night, and it can make real dollar differences. They have a wildly overpriced bar, but across the street is a gas station where you can get wine and beer. So if you like to drink, you can bring some, buy some at the gas station, or you can pay through the nose at the hotel. Now, how do you sign up for games, and how do you sign up to run games for NTRPG? Well, you do that on tabletop.events, just like you do with mini-cons, but there's some weirdness here and an extra feature that I wind up using a lot. The weirdness comes in 2 forms. One, whenever I'm looking around on tabletop.events, I can't actually find the link to North Texas Con. I have to go to the Facebook page where the organizers will post the link, and then I'm able to get to it from there. Now, once I've got a badge, I can go into my conventions folder, click that, and then get right into it. But if I'm just looking for it, I'm not going to find it, which I wonder if that's intentional or unintentional on the part of the con organizers. The second weird part is if you're signing up to run a game, you can fill out the submission form just fine. But once you send it in and it gets scheduled, you kind of lose control over the thing. It's been a strange technical practice of the con organizers. It doesn't make sense to me. It complicates logistics. In years past, what that would mean is that the game I was running wouldn't actually show up on my schedule, which is kind of inconvenient when you're trying to schedule what else you want to do. And there's periods of time where the con organizers won't let you cancel games, which if you need to cancel a game you're running, you need to let people know that you're canceling the game. When I and many others have asked the con organizers, they say that's for some reason blase having to do with keeping people from canceling their games. Well, if someone's decided they're not going to run a game, they're not going to run a game. And so all that's doing is making them look bad and screwing over the players who may or may not find out that the game got canceled. This is the only con I've seen using this practice, and I don't see the benefit of why they do it. Now, the good feature that I was going to talk about they do on tabletop.events is once they've got enough events scheduled to start releasing the schedule, the con organizers will open up half of the seats for early bird purchase. Now, I'm not talking big dollars here. These are $5 a seat, and those $5 go to benefit the con. But if there's a game that you really want to get into and you're afraid of losing out on the competition for those limited number of seats, here's your chance to do it. I've used it quite a bit and I haven't regretted it at all. It's helped me make sure that I can get into the games I really want to get into and taking the stress off of wondering if I'm going to get it the moment general registration opens up, or if I'm going to lose out. So how did I get there? Well, I live in the Florida Panhandle, and Dallas is about 13 hours drive away. That's a bit more than what I want to do. So I went to the Pensacola airport, and in about an hour and a half, Southwest Airlines had me from Penis, I'm not kidding, Penis, to Love Field in Dallas, the home of Southwest Airlines, which isn't sponsoring me here, but by all means, do so, Southwest. I use you almost every time I fly. It takes approximately 20 minutes to get from Love Field to that area, so it wasn't much of an inconvenience. Now, if you fly into DFW Airport, the Westin has a shuttle that'll move you for free between the two, but then you're stuck on their schedule. And anytime you have to call for an Uber, they're there quickly in that area. They're lurking around because there's a major airport right there. They want to be on the call if someone hollers at them. Now, the convention space is ample. As you can see on the map here, everything revolves around this central hub. Now, there's plenty of room to spread out for all the gaming events that we have. So noise usually isn't too big of an issue here. And this year, the hotel staff added some screens to help absorb some of the sound in the rooms where you had more than one table playing at a time. We have the central gallery where there's plenty of open gaming going on along with scheduled events. And then each of these separate rooms receive their own attention, but there are a few other further towards the lobby. Now we have a large vendor hall where I spent quite a bit of money, found some good deals, and we had quite a bit of representation of both publishers pushing their own stuff, old material being available, and resellers of multiple different publishing lines. Well represented. Plus, we got some unique items for North Texas Con. And for the collectors out there, well, there's one more rabbit hole for you to run down. One of those special items I'm talking about is Islands of Peril, put out by Pacesetter Games. This is a campaign adventure based on unpublished notes of John Eric Holmes, who you might remember as being the guy who put together the first complete edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And the con got a special edition cover illustrated by Keelan Halverson, or The Wonky. And it's a strange cover that I find the longer I look at it, the more interesting it becomes. The more details and intricacies pop out at me. I'm really impressed with this thing. And in addition to the vendors hall, you also have the daily silent auction, where I competed for several different auctions, but the one I was able to get a hold of was Sword of Air by Bill Webb. Now, the reason I wanted this one is because at TotalCon, when I asked Bill Webb, the creator of Frog God Games, which product of his was he most proud of having written, and he said it was this one right here, Sword of Air. It's not a cheap book to find, but I wound up getting a pretty good deal on it. And the proceeds of the silent auction go to benefit the con. Because if you don't know, most RPG conventions don't make a lot of money. Now, when it comes to layout of the gaming space, there are two things that support the con goers are ready availability of bathrooms that are clean and lots of stalls, lots of urinals. You're never going to have to wait in line for one. And they have water dispensers all over the place, so you're never going to go thirsty. Now, the con is capped at approximately 500 attendees, which is on the smaller side of cons, but believe me, there's plenty there because the size of the special guest list, consisting of the surviving luminaries from the early days of the hobby, all the way up to those still blazing trails moving ahead into the future, we've got a bunch of them. Like the ratio of special guests and designers to attendees is really rich here. So if there is a luminary that you want to game with and they're running games, which they probably are because the con is paying for them to be there to run games, your chances of getting in here are awesome. Whereas at bigger cons, good luck. You're competing with thousands of other people. And here those luminaries might actually come in and play in one of your games if you're running one. But there's not a whole lot in the immediate vicinity of these hotels. So if you have a car and you don't have to walk in the Texas heat, there are some fantastic restaurants, including Texas barbecue joint Hard 8, which, gotta say, probably the best barbecue I've had at a restaurant. It's a little pricey, but everything is these days, and it is totally worth your time. I stuffed myself sick, as did the two friends that went with me. Speaking of food options, immediately across the street from the Westin, there's a Denny's. It's 24 hours, and sometimes they have great specials. And so if you're looking for traditional breakfast food and you don't want to miss any of the categories, go right there. Their service is usually good. The food's almost always good, but their ice machine is serious and will vibrate the floor beneath you. So go to the left of the register when you want a seat. You'll get less of it over there. And then there's that gas station right there, which also has a taco counter. so you could have the joy of gas station tacos. And when I say joy, I actually do mean it. Most of my friends were poo-pooing me and saying, oh, gas station tacos, that's like gas station sushi. Well, I've had gas station sushi, and it was good. At least it was in Memphis. And the gas station tacos were delightful, so I would highly recommend those as well. In addition to the food options you have from the Westin itself, North Texas Con goes to some effort to get food truck vendors to come and park outside the convention space, so you have more options available. Now, the Hispanic food truck that comes by with the $4 churros, do not pay them $4 for a churro. It is not that good. It is phoned in. But the rest of their food's pretty good, and some of the trucks are amazing. The barbecue truck was good. There's usually a truck there that sells this New Jersey ham sandwich, which unfortunately I didn't get this year. And it's unfortunate because I love it and it's cheap and I lived off of it last year. But there was a breakfast burger truck that made some really tasty business, and it didn't break the bank. So for about $15 or less, you can get your meal. And the way I got that food in my belly rarely involved me going and standing in front of the truck in the sun and the heat by myself. No. I sat at my gaming table and it was brought right to me. The secret is winches. And I don't mean rope and pulley winches, baby. I mean hot female winches. These are the sweetest girls in the world. I mean, every darn one of them. You figured they'd get bedraggled or annoyed dealing with all of us gamers all the time. But no, they were just sweet throughout. Fantastic customer service, easy to work with, and they don't have a built-in service charge, but I made sure to tip generously on each one of my visits because I appreciate them being there. And they've been there every year that I've gone, and it's kind of spoiled me for other cons where you have to fend for yourself and worry about when am I going to have time to eat? Am I going to have to build breaks in for my game? Am I supposed to eat just a bunch of junk food that I got in my bag? No. The answer to your cons sustenance problems are winches. So thank you, winches. We love you. So we've covered what North Texas Con is, the hotel, your hotel options around there, some transportation considerations, how I got there, how I ate, where you can drink, and our wonderful winches. Need I say that again? So now we can get into what did I actually do at this con? Well, North Texas Con officially runs for 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but an increasing option for games is the Wednesday evening pre-con Get It On series of games, which is good for your game coverage because actually that Sunday is dead. That place is dead. Everyone packs up and goes home except for the hardest core of the hardcore, including myself, and disappears on Sunday, which to me is an enormous waste of time and resources. You came all the way here, get 2 more games in before you got to clear out. But that's not what most people do. But Sunday is good for pickup games, but boy do we get some variety on the Wednesday night pre-con Get It On. And a special treat for me this con was my friend Pat from New Hampshire that I went to TotalCon with earlier this year. As kind of a prisoner exchange program, he came down to North Texas Con with me. I'm pleased to report he had a great time, and the only person who gave him a hard time, I'm going to give them a hard time later on. We scheduled a number of games together, we hung out, we did some pickup games together, we drank a lot. And that's something I should address about the North Texas Con is because some conventions, they frown on any alcohol use at anywhere other than the bar in the hotel where it's being held. North Texas Con is very permissive though. At the very first event I went to in the first North Texas Con I attended, somebody passed me a bottle of Blue Corn whiskey and said, have at it. That set the tone. So long as you're being discreet and can handle your liquor, it's okay to have a sip or two. Now, on that Wednesday night, the very first game I had and that Pat joined me for was Flashing Blades, Un colis de l'Hôtel de Bourgogne. Can you retrieve stolen French naval secrets before your rivals? Uses a Flashing Blades RPG from FGU. So this is an older role-playing game set in 17th century Paris, France. And it was run by Jerry Stratton, who I've played with before and had a great time with. So it was good to game with him in a different context. Now the story is that an English spy has stolen French naval documents, compromising France's strength on the seas. More importantly, the King's Musketeers and the Cardinal's Guards are vying to restore the documents and capture the spy before their rival. Get ready to swing from chandeliers, fight the Cardinal's Guards or the King's Musketeers, and outwit the enemies of France in Mark Pettigrew's game of adventure, intrigue, and Flashing Blades. So in addition to finding out one of the other players is probably distant related to me through Wales, the setup we were given is that we had 2 factions of players, one in the Cardinal's Guards and one in the King's Musketeers, and of course we hated each other, have to go to a night at the theater where the lead actor is an Englishman who is suspected to be smuggling those secrets out of France and into perfidious Albion. Our task was to find the plans and get them back to the king. Some of us played sergeants, some of us played nobles, some of us played officers. Pat and I happened to wind up being the sergeant and the officer of the Cardinal's Guards, which Why wouldn't we be? It's the best organization. And we created a mess. And literally, I mean created a mess. I flung all the wine that was to be had at one of the bars on an opposing nobleman while Pat fought him to death in a duel which Pat won. And might I say, the Cardinals Guard acquitted ourselves very well in the duels against the King's Musketeers, and we recovered the stolen naval secrets and got away with them. So technically, we won the game. Eat it, King's Musketeers. So Flashing Blades was a system I hadn't played before. But the moment I got to looking at this character sheet and having Jerry explain the rules to me, this sounded like a plussed up version of On Guard, which is a game I'm going to review on this channel in the future and that I love dearly. There's rules for social climbing, for duels, getting plum positions in different military organizations, and this one has secrets for the characters, which was a welcome complication to the much more simplistic and free range On Guard characters. And it was a good time. After that session, we went into a game of Shuffling Horror Texas 74 Edition, The Cannibal Creeps, a playtest board game of dear friend Larry Wickman. This was an alternate rule set for his excellent Shuffling Horror board game. Shuffling Horror is a board game for you if the idea of creating a B-horror movie as you play the game sounds appealing to you. And the setup for this playtest is the time, 1974, the place, Texas, the problem, cannibals and zombies. Oh my, as if the zombie apocalypse wasn't bad enough, this unreleased expansion pack to Pittsburgh 68 Shuffling Horror adds a family of crazed cannibals to the mix. The Game Master, also known as director in Shuffling Horror, controls the movie's plot twists and monsters and deals the cards. Players do their best to make it to the closing credits by taking their survivor characters, intelligently playing those cards, and fighting against zombies and cannibals without getting eaten by both. Eliminated players join the director's efforts against the remaining players, because this is a cooperative board game until it isn't, because eliminated players get to pick up zombies or cannibals of their own and go after those who remain. Who will be standing when the film fades to black? B-movie thrills and chills await. I've played Shuffling Horror many times, and I've ran it at a few cons myself, and will do so in the future because I'm a big fan of this thing. And anytime I get to hang out with Larry, it's a good time. And that wrapped up the Wednesday night pre-con Get It On games. Moving into Thursday morning, I was flying solo into Dreams of Dracula, a scenario for the Chill system, which I had never played but had heard about, so I was interested to see how this goes. And it was run by one of my favorite RPG luminaries, Steve Winter, who I played with several times before. And the basic setup for this one is two women hover at the edge of death, gripped by a strange illness. A desperate husband contacts old friends who have a reputation for solving inexplicable supernatural mysteries. Nothing can prepare them for the horror they'll face when they confront ancient, undying evil. Based on the adventure Dreams of Dracula from Trail of Cthulhu, but using the original Chill rules from 1984. I played a disgraced American naval commander who wound up in Britain, and that character was the lead connection to the NPC husband, so he could look into the case of his wife's wasting disease and her best friends. Without getting too much into the story, it was incredibly derivative of Bram Stoker's Dracula, so the basic pattern of what was going to happen was very easy to spot. Player cooperation wasn't great, as unfortunately Steve Winter's command of the table was also not the best, because we spent hours badgering this one NPC who was not going to give us anything more to go with, when where we needed to go was down the road at the insane asylum that one NPC was using for ill intent. At one point I asked one of the other players, hey, while the other players are off doing this, why don't you and me go check out this place to see if there's anything spooky going on? And he was absolutely disinterested in doing such a thing and swatted it down. I didn't want to spotlight myself and go off on my own adventure, so I stuck with the rest of the group. And it turns out when one of my other dear friends, Glenn Ritchie, from the Blade Runner game that I won't shut up about, saw we were running out of time, he decided, okay, clearly the answer is not where we're at, badgering this one NPC. We need to go to that insane asylum that Steve wanted to go to earlier and hammer our way through the adventure. And what do you know? That's where the rest of the adventure was at. We were barking up the wrong tree for all too much time. So it wasn't the best game I've ever been in, and it wasn't the best Steve Winter game I've ever been in. Unfortunately, this is a point that I want to bring up because I've heard other people have this experience as well as me having it personally. Some of those great RPG writers and creators you're a fan of, not always the best person running a game. Now, all of us have off days, but just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at everything. And so somebody might be really good at writing a book, but running adventures based on that book maybe less interesting. So if you get all excited because you get a game with one of the people that you really respect, just go in knowing it might not be the top shelf experience you're hoping for, but it also could be. So just don't feel too bad if it doesn't turn out to be an A+ experience. Next up, dear friend Glenn Ritchie was running a chainmail game, which I've never played before and was the progenitor of Dungeons & Dragons, so I signed up for Restless Bones in Ancient Sands. In ancient sands, restless heroes lie, that Pharaoh's honor might not die. In sacred gardens old, gods slumber, dreaming of ancient wars unnumbered, of powers, passions, and sacrifices made, of deeds of honor so dearly paid. Enfeebled thy whisper old forgotten names, to rebuke the shadow's darkening flames. So since Chainmail is mostly a war game, we weren't doing a whole bunch of role-playing, we were just fighting different monsters in a tactical fashion. The fights were good, the rules were good and easy to pick up and learn, and about halfway through, Glenn hit us with a twist in the story that, it was a bit of a surprise. The table was good, the DM was good. He's a little soft-spoken and the room got a little bit loud, but I was able to follow along, everything was going on. So I had a good time, thanks Glenn. Unfortunately, at the same time, Pat had gone over to a different game that was run by Dimitri Del Castillo, who did not cancel the game or notify attendees through tabletop.events, where they had to sign up for the thing, that it had been canceled. And so you had a table full of players looking to play Dimitri's game. He wasn't there, wasn't going to be there. So Pat pulled out his On Guard game and taught some folks how to play On Guard instead, so he made the best of a bad time. But no show DMs. You've got options on how to tell people, well, you ain't going to be there. Use them, or else you go on my wall of shame. And then Pat and I finished out our Thursday with Jersey Shore 3. Run by published adventure module writer Tom Knaus, Jersey Shore 3 is a Call of Cthulhu adventure set in, you guessed it, New Jersey. And despite Tom never having seen one episode of the TV show Jersey Shore, he understands the premise enough to make an adventure about those kind of people going on horror quests. This is the second year I've been in one of his games, and it was a great time. So what happens in Jersey Shore 3? Fasten your seatbelts for a wild ride of horror and hilarity as the ladies of Jersey Shore take off for a destination wedding in the Caribbean. We went to Montego Bay, Jamaica, and there was some undead spirit and legendary musical acts, an investigation, a jilted lover, a wedding that didn't happen, and destruction of historical landmarks. It was a good time. Most of the table got in on it, but unfortunately, what kept this year's game from being as balls to the wall amazing as Jersey Shore 2 was last year was two of the players at the table were not getting into the spirit of what Jersey Shore is going for. They were sullen. They weren't role-playing in the spirit of a bunch of girls going on a Caribbean vacation, letting their hair down, and going wild when horror breaks out. They weren't even really role-playing, and so that was kind of like a lead balloon at the table. We still had a great time, but players feed into each other's energies and heighten the experience for everybody. So if you're one of the guys that happens to be watching this, just give us a little more next time. You will enjoy it. And then Friday morning, Pat and I rolled up to the Dungeons & Dragons / Hack Noya trademark crossover event. Now, Hack Noya is a joke version of the legendary role-playing game Top Secret, penned by Merle Rasmussen, and Hack Noya has just been a running joke in Jolly Blackburn's comics Knights of the Dinner Table. But recently, Merle and Jolly decided that we should make an actual game out of this, and so this adventure is part of the playtest for a Hack Noya game. Run by Merle Rasmussen, there is nobody more qualified to run an espionage game than the guy who came up with the original one. So what's the setup here? A splinter group of conspiracists of America has taken over an abandoned mine in the American Southwest. They trust no one. They believe in subliminal advertising, moon landing hoax, Roswell crash cover-up, chemtrails, COVID's link to 5G, and other conspiracies. Some of those are true conspiracies. Your mission is to infiltrate their three-dimensional dungeon and determine if they are a danger to society or themselves. Pre-generated characters provided. And these pre-generated characters, there was a lot of interesting characters to pick from and a lot of humor baked into the cake. One guy picked a former UFO abductee, one picked a paranormal reporter, Pat picked a cleanup guy, which if you have corpses around that you're not supposed to have, this is the kind of person you call to make sure they go away. And I picked a Bilderberger. If you haven't heard of the Bilderberger group, well, just Google that and you'll see more than you need to. Alex Jones has done a lot of really good reporting on that. And yes, they really exist. If you think of the archetype of the evil Western government elite group that runs the world, the Bilderbergers are involved. I despise them, and I decided to play one. And boy, did I play an ass. I was dismissive, condescending, and when people weren't giving me what I wanted, I turned on the charm and got exactly what I wanted because, as a Bilderberger, I get what I want. Merle had several interesting elements, too, just the setup of the game, let alone the adventure itself. First, he passed out a bunch of little figurines, coins, objects to represent things you can use in the game, and he introduced tension into it because he started passing them around and you could only hold on to 3 of the items and you had to pick which ones they were based on what you wanted to do with them and then pass along to the next players the ones you didn't want to have. And if the items wound up back with Merle, they were out of the game. You couldn't use them. So as a Bilderberger, I thought, well, what is it I want the most? I got a mystery ball that could do whatever I wanted one time when I decided I wanted it to do something. I got a vial of Ebola with an antidote, and I took raw chunks of gold. I feel that's got my Bill Gates bases covered pretty well. Another interesting thing that he had us do was he passed out a bunch of Legos and told each of the players to design a part of the dungeon ourselves, which was fun on its own, figuring out what I'm going to do with this thing to make it interesting for other people at a con to play through. And for Merle, it guarantees that the adventure is going to be different every single time he runs it because no player is going to make the same dungeon level as the other players. So we picked our items, we made our dungeon levels, and then we got into the game. Turns out, where we were going, I don't think we actually ran into any of the Conspiracy of America people, but we did run into a group of opposing secret agents in a bidding war for an illicit nuclear weapon, which, because one of our people chose to take blank checks from the US federal government as one of their items, he won the bidding by saying 30 million, and none of the opposing agents were able to stop him. So while Pat was sneaking around murdering enemy agents and guards covertly and hiding the bodies, another player was busy capturing another one, I snuck around to the one elevator in and out of the bidding facility, heard that we had won the auction, stepped into the elevator, unleashed my Ebola, got out of there, and secret microphoned over to the rest of the team. Make sure the bad guys get in the elevator and none of the rest of you go after them. And they did. Their characters didn't know what I had done, but all 4 of the remaining bad guys got into the elevator, went up, took the Ebola with them. We got the nuclear weapon, and we captured one of them that had been isolated. So we captured an enemy agent, secured a nuclear bomb, and led to the grisly death of those enemy agents plus whoever they casually came into contact with all in one adventure. I think that's pretty legit. Now for my dungeon level, what I went for was a subterranean kind of temple area, and I relied on the vague but creepy vibe to it. And I built into it a room where there was a sky laser open to the sky to appeal to the UFO abductee and the paranormal investigator. But unfortunately, they got creeped out and left my dungeon level when one of the characters saw the bottomless pit with the wind gushing out of it and decided he needed to jump straight into it with no visible means of getting out. And guess what happened to him? He died. He effing died at the bottom of a bottomless pit, which he should not have jumped into. And there were, in fact, illustrations on the wall showing people sacrificing folks unwillingly to the aforementioned pit. After the player sat there for several minutes with no new character coming along, I asked Merle, hey, is he getting another character? And he was like, no, he's dead. Because Merle is hard. Don't screw up in Merle's game. But Merle was fantastic, and I had a great time hanging out with him, got a picture with him, and he was just a very charming person. He was so charming, he taught me into buying games from another person's table. So if you go to a con and get a chance to play with or interact with Merle Rasmussen, treat yourself, do it. Apparently at one point I even made his wife laugh, which he said nobody does. And so with that being Friday morning, Friday afternoon, I had signed up to run Cobalts in Space. One of the games I like to run at cons is Cobalts Ate My Baby, because it's stupid fun, it's fast, and the rules are set up to make all the other players act like a kobold, barking and acting like cannibalistic little shits. So it's madcap fun. So what's the setup for this one? If you're faint of heart or have problems eating your teammates, this isn't the game for you. Your band of fuzzy, murderous, and inept kobolds are sent to bring back a space chicken and space egg for a feast, or take their place on the menu. This is the game designed to be played as stupidly as possible, so treat yourself. I wrote this scenario, and I've ran it at another con, and I find it so funny that even when I'm reading the instructions in it, to this day, I break out laughing. And the players got to see me do that when I was reading ahead to give them the flavor text for the place they went, and I just broke down laughing, banging my head against the con table. Well, they had a ridiculously good time too. Even the one that I could tell was a shy person got into the act. And in the first scene where they went to a hot dog stand, they fought the teenage attendant of the hot dog stand who decided he didn't eat any of this crap and he was going to leave it to him. But as a weapon, he had been pushing the kobolds that got up onto the hot dog counter into the vat of boiling hot dog water, and they were taking damage. Well, one of them fell in, and she happens to have this flaw for being a kobold that when she's injured, she smells like a fresh human baby, which is the most delicious thing in all of existence. And that made all of the other kobolds want to eat her. So they came up with a plan. One of them had an iron skillet that he placed on top of her while she was in the water, and they all held it until the rocking stopped. Yes, they cooked her alive. One of them saw on his kobold reference sheet that he had spices. So they spiced her up, they wrapped her with breading, and they had a kobold kolache. Within the first scene, I had group orchestrated cannibalism, and it just went downhill from there. Oh, I loved it, and it was everything I could hope it would be. They bribed me, which is part of the mechanics in Cobalts Ate My Baby. You can bribe the guy running the game to get the outcome you want, and they actually won. They actually won the scenario, which gives me reason to write the next scenario, Cobalts Take Manhattan. You're all fantastic. I look forward to playing with you again in the future. Oh, one of those Cobalts happened to be dear friend David Hubbard, and he was just as electric in his performance of a Cobalt as he was a replicant in Blade Runner. So after that rousing game of Cobalts Ate My Baby, where twice I thought they were going to rush me and maybe eat me and Pat went to the 4th annual whiskey tasting. When I was talking about how they're easy on the booze at North Texas, I meant they're easy on the booze. Unlike last year where they did a series of awful German whiskeys, and there's a reason you never heard of German whiskey, and pickle beer, this year we had moonshine, owlbear liver squeezings, and a gamut of Jim Beam products. Now, I haven't messed with Jim Beam a whole lot myself. I'm not too big of a bourbon guy. I like it, but I like Scotch better. And so this was a good educational experience for me. And plus, they gave you these fantastic coasters to take home. And with that amount of alcohol, I was feeling pretty good. And then there was so much left over, I asked, hey, what you doing with that? And the organizer said that I could take as much as I want with me so long as I bring the little sampler bottles back to him. And that was probably a bad idea because I drank way too much the rest of the con, and Pat kept it together, but I kept pretty lubricated, which I don't like to drink and game because it impinges on my performance, as I found out in the next game. But the whiskey tasting, definitely a good time, would go to again in the future. But after that, I went to Luau Lou's Frankenstein versus Gozilla. A scenario for the work-in-progress Movies Till Dawn B-Movie Cinema RPG. Are you seeing a pattern? B-movie board game, B-movie RPG. Yeah, I got it type. In this game, you play as B-movie actors in this 1968 bit of catch-penny Italian cinema. Cashing in on the monster craze, a revived Frankenstein monster defends a coastal power plant from the onslaught of the reptilian giant Gozilla. Model sets will be crushed. Play as the nuclear scientist, Dr. Spritzel, the test pilot, Dave Action, the mysterious agent, AJ Auntie, Jeppy, the obnoxious little Italian boy, that's the one I picked, or the titular roles of Frankenstein or Gozilla. You won't want to miss not seeing this film. So with a write-up like that, how could I go wrong? And I'd played with Luau Lou once before when he ran a West End Star Wars session at the 2023 North Texas Con. Had a good time there. So this seemed perfectly aimed at me, and I had a good time. The movie was just as much of a disaster as you might think it would be. So once I got the hang of the game mechanics, I started to really see the logic of it and could play more effectively. But unfortunately, that alcohol muddled my brain a little bit, so I wasn't as quick or witty as I had wanted to be for a game this cool. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to playing it again in the future. This is definitely a kind of game I would like to pick up on. So Luau Lou, do your thing. Make this happen. So as Jeppy, I had to come up with an annoying catchphrase that I worked into each scene because that's part of the character. And there are certain advantages and disadvantages of playing a child actor, which are detailed pretty effectively on these interesting character cards that Lou gave everybody. So the goal of each turn is to film a scene of the B movie, and each character is trying to dominate the screen time and come off looking the best from that scene. They can play different cards to try to up their performance and steal most of the limelight, and they can also play cards to screw up other people's shot and make their work look bad in comparison. Now, some interesting mechanics that Lou came up with, and I'm not going to give them all away here, but the stock footage feature that you could play. This is pretty neat, and some of the things you can get in the stock footage are horrifying. Like, let me share this one with you from Jeppy. Remember, this is a small child. This footage had test audiences mortified, but the film's editor is a real dick and decided to leave it in. In it, Jeppy's lower half is crushed under falling debris during a fight scene. He lays there, pinned down, screaming in pain. Then, at the end of the act, we see Jeppy, now a double amputee, emerging from the hospital in a wheelchair. Now that's some dick stuff right there, but that is a powerful move to play, and I could win a scene by using that thing. A more pedestrian one would be Gozilla picks Jeppy up in his big foam latex hand, raising him to eye level with his rear projected head. Jeppy talks to Gozilla, explaining to him that, establish an important fact with a monologue here. And in the game, you're expected to give that monologue, so it can be stupid, but you do need to give it. And we did get interrupted during that game by the fire alarm system that seems to go off every single North Texas con, even though there's no fire anywhere in there. But it did give me a chance to catch up with dear friend Casey Christopherson, who I played a couple sessions with at my first North Texas con, and that dude is metal. He is awesome. He does some great work. And so that was it for Friday night. Now Saturday morning I was up and eager because I was going to be in my second Kolchak game. Again, ran by Jerry Stratton. He's adapted the old TV series Kolchak The Nightstalker to an RPG form using the Daredevil system. And if you've never seen Kolchak The Nightstalker, oh buddy, you need to check this thing out. The creators of the X-Files say this is what we ripped our concept off from. Because hard-boiled, hard-ass, hard-edged investigative reporter Carl Kolchak fights werewolves, vampires, invisible spirits, the Wendigo, all kinds of things in this insane series. But old Jerry, he's a big fan, and there is a small community of Kolchak enthusiasts out there that won't let this thing die. And in Jerry's games, you get to play one of the named characters from the TV series. And this time I played Ron Uptight Updike, an effete, feminine, kind of useless dandy of a guy, and I played him to the T. So what was this scenario about? January 1977. Record cold temperatures have scientists talking about a new ice age. Cold in Chicago is nothing new. Neither is cold-blooded murder. But what happened in Chicago that January was so unprecedented, so outrageous, that even now I fear to reveal the chilling truth. One of the brilliant elements that Jerry weaves into these scenarios is real historic events. He gave us a number of handouts as we were doing our research, following the trail of clues that came from real books, real news reports from the era, which makes the scenario that much more lived in and experienced so much more real because so much of it is from the real world. And it was a heck of a lot of fun. And surprisingly, Ron Uptight Updike and his social connections really played a pivotal part in making the investigation work, and we all did survive to the end. This is one of those games that once I found out how good it was, every time Jerry Stratton runs one of these, I'm going to be in it. So thanks, Jerry. You're doing a great job. And after Kolchak, Far Out My Idol, I had a doubleheader with dear friend Christopher Clark. First in Castle Wolf Moon, 2F by Sea. This is the last adventure that he and Gary Gygax ever wrote together, using the first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules. There was a big old battle mat, some impressive figurines, and the pre-gens were easy to work with, along with choose your equipment so you could customize your pre-generated character to a certain extent. And we had some ass on us because we showed up at 7th level in this, and we got our butts kicked a lot. I believe 3 or 4 of the player characters just got killed straight off by the big bad that we triggered because there was this well and there was fire at the bottom of it, and we decided to go messing around down there. Turns out at the bottom of the well is a gateway to hell, and that's how they heat the castle, by fumes from hell, which sounds kind of like a bad idea to me. And it sounds like a really bad idea to me to intentionally try to go down it, but we did. And raise the alarm. So this adventure went right off the rails, especially when some white powder exploded on me and Pat. Oh yeah, Pat's in this one. So we did what players do best, and once we realized we were beyond any sensible approach to this adventure, we just screwed stuff up. A certain magic item that we found was called Powder of Sentience. And what I found out this means is when you sprinkle this powder on something, it becomes sentient and alive. Kind of like when I swallowed some and the last thing I ate became sentient and alive, so I had a little vomit familiar following me around. He was a nice guy. Now on the roof of the castle we found a cannon. And oh yeah, you better believe we made that thing sentient. With some finagling, we got it down off the roof and started going through the castle, just blowing the shit out of everything we could find. And we were supposed to rescue a princess somewhere along the lines. Pat had found these pills that apparently if you take one and then look at somebody, you can make a wish for them. So what'd Pat do? Well, we were running out of time in the session, so he took a pill, looked at one of the other players, and wished for that princess to be back home and safe. So technically we completed the mission, but we left a big old mess behind us. And that's rough and tumble AD&D First Edition. Life comes at you fast. Fireballs come at you fast. If you don't play smart, you wind up dead. After that, we had another adventure in Inner City, which is a game I dearly love, called The Mystery of Cement Shoes Lake. Again, run by Chris Clark and his Inner City system. For a description, all I really get on tabletop.events is, what's the best way to solve a bad Scooby-Doo style 1970s mystery? Why, with bullets, of course. You're a crook stuck in the world of bad 1970s and 1980s melodramas. You have to help citizens and make lots of ill-gotten gains. And you're all out of patience for the citizens. The God Poppy sent a couple of his boys to do a disposal job at Cement Shoes Lake, and they came back terrified. So now your good friends at Black Market Shipping have a trunk load of disposables and a problem with their normal means of taking out the trash. If you can fix things, the God Poppy has promised you a shopping spree worth 30 large at his warehouse. You've been meaning to take a vacation down by the lake for some time now anyway, so why not? I had Pat right along next to me and a bevy of other folks, which was probably actually too many players. In addition to 8 players that signed up on tabletop events, Chris let in 2 walk-ups. So you had 10 players, most of whom had never played the game before, and so Chris is having to explain all the rules to them. It wasn't the best situation for moving an adventure along in a timely manner. And even though it's called Mystery of Cement Shoes Lake, we spent the first half of the session holding up a fur coat store, which was fun in and of itself, but that ate up a lot of time we could have spent exploring Cement Shoes Lake and dealing with the problems up there. So it wasn't the best paced experience, and there were too many people, but it's still basically a good time because Chris is hysterical and the game itself is amusing. But that's a consideration for you to make if you're going to play in or run a con game. How many is the optimal number of people you need to have to make it a good experience for all the people that wind up at the table? Are the people at the table spending more time sitting there twiddling their thumbs, checking their phone than they are playing? Well, that's bad. That's why for my Cobalts game, I kept it to 6 people because I can keep 6 people engaged all at once. And especially with my DMing style, you don't have time to get bored because I've always got you doing something in the game. So this one was a bit of a miss. What do? It's not the worst thing that ever happened to me. And this is why you play test, to find out, do you even need that first half in the fur coat store, or should you ditch that and go straight on to the Mystery of Cement Shoes Lake? That's why you test your stuff out, read it over again, get someone else to check your work to see if everything that's there actually needs to be there, or if you could make a leaner, meaner experience by cutting some stuff out. So after the Chris Clark games, Larry Wickman was right back at it, running a pickup game of Shuffling Horror because he wasn't quite satisfied with how the first playtest had gone on Wednesday night, and so he wanted to do it again. Me, Pat, another Shuffling Horror aficionado, Carlos, and Luau Lou wandered up to do this playtest with Larry, and it was an entirely different experience than it was Wednesday night. It was an amazing game. There was action all over the place. I didn't know who was going to win until the very end, and I might have screwed Lou over and got him killed, but don't worry, I got killed in the process. It was a great game, lots of good feedback, and I'm very excited about some of the game mechanics that Larry's going to be implementing in the Texas 74 version. Lou was surprised at getting roped into the game and had a great time. Pat had a great time. I had a great time. Carlos had a great time. Larry had a great time. Even though Larry's a little salty and really gets antagonistic towards the players, you can tell he just wants to taste their blood. And Pat and I relentlessly called him out on it. But no, it was a great time. So after that rousing evening of Shuffling Horror with friends, it was getting late, but that means it was getting closer to the midnight auction. And I'm not talking about the midnight auction. What happens at the midnight auction stays at the midnight auction. And on Sunday, I'd scheduled my first game for 10 a.m., which gave me an opportunity to get some sleep. But 10 a.m. on Sunday, I was meeting up with dear friend Chris Holmes to playtest his Advanced Treasures of the Mummy's Tomb. This is a playtest game that Chris has been working on for several years, and I can report that it was fun. I was lucky that one of my fellow players was Jerry Stratton, so now I've been on both sides of the DM screen with him, and it was fun to play with, as was everybody else at the table. So this is a board game of vicious competition where you play Tomb Raiders, and it's a good time. It's got some lovely art, simple yet strategically deep mechanics, and Chris anticipated that the playtest was going to take 1 hour. Now, we didn't actually play Advanced Treasures of the Mummy's Tomb since we got to talking before the game started, and he said, let me run you through a 30-minute version of the basic version of the game, not the advanced version, so you can see what it's about. And we went hog wild in the basic version, so that 30-minute playtest wound up going to 2 hours. But as it said on the tin, you play a bunch of Tomb Raiders that are going around trying to collect treasure up to a certain amount and then get out of the tomb before a mummy comes and kills you. Now, some of the interesting things are the treasures, some of them are fake. So you might think it's worth a whole lot of money, but it's in fact not. Some of them are cursed and they will seriously screw you over. Some of them are magic and you can use them to do some really impressive stuff. And the PvP elements are really cool, so I like this one. Now, unfortunately, me and the Blade Runner gang from 2023 had been planning for a year to get back together to do a second session of Blade Runner since we had such an amazing experience together. One of them got called away on a family vacation that had to happen right then and no other time. One of them had to go home early. One of them was hungover and couldn't focus long enough, so that left me and Paul Smith looking for something to do. Fortunately, he had the line on a pickup game of Call of Cthulhu called The Scalpel. And if you remember the David Hubbard interview, he told us about The Scalpel. So I got to experience that for myself. Playing a disillusioned drifter, Amos Johnson, me and Paul really bonded in this game. I'm not going to give away the details because hopefully you'll play Scalpel at some point, but you will be scarred just like I scarred his insides in saving his life. Yeah, that's a good introduction to the Call of Cthulhu Delta Green game. It's intense, and the ending was amazing. But I made sure to build in characterization to get into the role. And early on in the session, made sure all the other characters knew that They were not Amos's friends. He's not getting attached to you, so don't ask him for too much. But by the end, after all they had been through together, all the trauma they had suffered, all the memories they had lost, all the companions they had lost, when we were given the offer to join Delta Green, I looked to my left, I looked to my right, and I said, well, I figure I'll go where my friends are going. And that provoked actual emotional reactions from the players at the table, coming to the realization of, oh, we're friends now? And I was like, yeah, we're friends now. We're friends now? Yeah, I've been in your guts with a scalpel. We're friends now. That builds a bond. So thank you, Dave Quick, for running an excellent adventure and running that pickup game. You saved our Sunday, and we had a great time. So I've talked a lot about the games I've been in, and you might have noticed how certain individuals keep coming up, and my affection and enjoyment of their company has been a big part of this con. And that's a key thing about role-playing game conventions, and going back to the same ones you like each year, is that you start to build friendships and create social networks of people that you could collaborate with, that you could game with in the future, that you can inspire and be inspired by. That's the purpose of a lot of conventions and other industries, is the wheeling and dealing between corporations and between individuals to make the future happen for their industry. Now, Pat, you might have recognized from the TotalCon review, but there's another guy that kept popping up in my games by the name of Ryan Howard. You may remember my review of his adventure module, Old Knight Divine, and our accompanying interview that went with it. But since that came out, and today, Ryan Howard and Keelan Halverson decided that they were going to do a Kickstarter to put out an adventure double pack where each contributes an adventure. Well, they decided they needed an editor, and that wound up being me. I got hired for that. I already took the check. The strippers have it. There's no refunds here. And so Ryan showed up with just a few games scheduled, ones he was running, and he decided he wanted to have that open schedule so he could move as the winds dictated, to go wherever his interest took him. And that wound up being a lot of games with me and a lot of hangout time. And it was good fun because I didn't know this guy that well, but now he's a good friend. As a matter of fact, he also did an excellent follow-up interview with one of the con organizers, Bad Mike, and then one of the con mainstays, Eric Tinkar. I would highly recommend you check it out. It was very helpful in understanding parts of the con history that we didn't cover here. It was a good interview, and you'll find that on Ryan's Rollin' Bones channel. He's got a lot of good interviews on there. I'd highly recommend you go check them out. And Paul Smith, my Blade Runner DM. We hung out some more, and it was a great time. I got to learn a lot of really neat stuff about the dude. It just makes me want to hang out with him more, because after the Call of Cthulhu game was over on Sunday, he was hanging around at the hotel. I was hanging around at my hotel. He said, why don't you come on over to the bar? We'll hang out together. So me, him, and his girlfriend hung out, had a great conversation. And a lot of folks, as time goes on and they get deeper and deeper into con life, they don't even play games at the conventions. They just go to hang out and drink with the people that are there. And they might get a game here or there, but it's that personal interaction that has so much more value for them. And it can have that kind of value for you too. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, find a con nearby or find a destination con you want to check out and go for it. But if you want in North Texas, you better be quick. We are full. Badges are already on sale. I already got mine for June 2025. So if you've made it this far, hopefully I've been entertaining. Hopefully I've shown you some game ideas that you might not have heard before. Maybe you learned some lessons along with me. Maybe you learned lessons I didn't. And I'd love to hear about your thoughts and what you learned in the comments below. So please drop them there. Have you been to North Texas? Would you like to go? Let's talk about that too. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this around to other folks who might be interested in the RPG hobby. And my dear, dear friends, as we part for now, I wish you nothing but the best.